Something just changed in the spiritual realm around you, and the people attacking your energy can feel it before you do. That sudden chaos in your life? The strange silence from someone you thought would never leave? The emotional exhaustion that hits you right before midnight? None of it is random. Because when a chosen one is about to reunite with their twin flame, the final spiritual battle always begins. And this is the part nobody warned you about. The closer you get to your divine union, the more intense the resistance becomes. Have you noticed how old wounds are suddenly reopening? How certain people became cold, jealous, or strangely aggressive for no reason? Why does it feel like everything is testing your spirit all at once? That is not failure. That is confirmation. Something ancient is breaking. A karmic cycle that followed you for years is collapsing in real time. And the spiritual forces that benefited from your confusion are terrified because your soul is finally waking up to who you truly are. You were never losing your path. You were being prepared for reunion. But before your twin flame can fully enter your life, one final battle had to expose everyone and everything that was never aligned with your destiny. And tonight, you are going to understand why this battle is the clearest sign your reunion is real. Something shifted around you recently, and deep down, you know it. Maybe it happened quietly. Maybe it came in the middle of the night when you suddenly woke up at exactly 3:11 a.m. with your heart racing for no reason. Maybe it came through a dream so vivid that even after opening your eyes, you could still feel the emotional weight pressing against your chest. Or maybe it arrived through chaos, arguments appearing out of nowhere, people acting strangely cold toward you, emotional exhaustion hitting you in waves, or a strange feeling that your entire life is standing on the edge of something irreversible. Chosen one, listen carefully. This is not random. The spiritual realm becomes extremely active when a divine reunion is close, and before two souls aligned by destiny can come together. A final spiritual battle always emerges to test whether they are truly ready to leave behind old karmic cycles forever. That is why everything feels heavier lately. That is why your spirit feels tired even when your body has rested. That is why people who once ignored you suddenly watch you closely. And that is why your intuition has become impossible to silence. Because your energy is changing. For years, you questioned yourself. You wondered whether you were imagining the synchronicities. You tried to convince yourself that the repeated signs meant nothing. You told yourself to stop overthinking every coincidence. But the signs kept multiplying. The numbers appeared everywhere. Songs began answering emotions you never spoke aloud. Dreams became messages. Random strangers said things that felt directed specifically at your soul. And now the intensity is growing. The universe only increases pressure when a breakthrough is near. Think about your life over the past few months. Hasn't it felt like everything hidden is suddenly being exposed? Friendships that lasted years are collapsing overnight. People you trusted are revealing jealousy you never noticed before. Conversations feel strange. Energy feels off. Certain environments suddenly make you feel drained, anxious, or spiritually suffocated. There is a reason for this. Your soul is no longer energetically compatible with places, people, and situations that were built for an older version of you. The closer you move toward divine alignment, the more uncomfortable false connections become. That discomfort is not punishment. It is spiritual separation. And what makes this season terrifying for many chosen ones is that the battle rarely looks spiritual. At first, it looks emotional, psychological, physical. It appears through confusion, exhaustion, delays, silence, setbacks, and emotional attacks from people you never expected would hurt you. But beneath all of it, something much deeper is happening. An old karmic structure is collapsing. You see, many chosen ones were conditioned their entire lives to doubt themselves. Since childhood, you may have felt different from everyone around you. More sensitive, more emotional, more intuitive. You could walk into a room and immediately feel tension nobody else noticed. You sensed dishonesty before people exposed themselves. You felt energy shifts before events unfolded. And because of that sensitivity, people often misunderstood you. Some called you too emotional. Others said you were overthinking. Some even mocked your spiritual awareness because they could not understand what your soul naturally perceived. But what if your sensitivity was never weakness? What if it was preparation? Because chosen ones are often spiritually awakened long before the people around them. Their hearts carry deeper emotional intelligence. Their souls recognize truth faster. And that awareness becomes threatening to individuals who still operate through manipulation, ego, or emotional control. This is why your journey has been so painful. Not because you were cursed, but because your soul came here to break patterns that existed long before you were born. And whenever generational cycles begin breaking, resistance appears. Have you noticed how people become uncomfortable when you start healing? Isn't it strange how certain individuals supported you only when you were suffering, confused, or emotionally dependent, but became distant the moment you started reclaiming your power? That is not coincidence. Some people were connected to the wounded version of you, not the awakened one. And as your vibration changes, those connections naturally weaken. This is one of the hardest truths chosen ones must accept. Not everyone who walked beside you was meant to walk into your next season. Some people were karmic teachers. Some were mirrors. Some were lessons disguised as love. And some entered your life specifically to trigger wounds your soul needed to heal before reunion could occur. Because the twin flame journey is not ordinary love. It is transformation through fire. That is why the universe will never allow the reunion to happen while both souls are still chained to old trauma, toxic attachments, or emotional illusions. Everything unstable must collapse first. Everything false must surface first. Everything hidden must be exposed first. And that process can feel brutal. Many chosen ones mistakenly believe the chaos means they are moving away from their destiny. But spiritually, the opposite is often true. Chaos increases when timelines shift. The moment your soul begins approaching divine alignment, unresolved energies rise to the surface for release. Old fears return one final time. Toxic people become more aggressive. Emotional triggers intensify. Doubt grows louder. Why? Because the final battle is designed to test whether you will return to old cycles or finally choose your higher path. This is the spiritual crossroads. And many people fail here because they mistake discomfort for failure. But you must understand this clearly. The breakdown is part of the breakthrough. There is a reason you suddenly feel detached from things you once chased desperately. A reason certain conversations no longer excite you. A reason your spirit craves solitude more than noise lately. Your soul is recalibrating. The old version of you is dying. And death, spiritual death, is never comfortable. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. The process is tight, painful, and restrictive before freedom finally emerges. In the same way, your soul is shedding identities, attachments, and emotional wounds that cannot follow you into your next chapter. That is why you feel emotionally stretched between two realities. Part of you senses something beautiful approaching. Another part fears losing everything familiar. This inner conflict is common before divine reunion, because your spirit recognizes the coming transformation before your physical life catches up to it. And perhaps the most painful part is this. The people around you may not understand what you are experiencing at all. They may think you are becoming distant. They may accuse you of changing. They may misunderstand your need for silence, healing, or boundaries. But chosen one, not everyone is meant to understand a spiritual awakening they have never experienced themselves. You are not crazy for feeling this shift. You are not weak for feeling exhausted. And you are not imagining the spiritual pressure surrounding your life right now. Something is ending. Something karmic. Something ancient. For years, certain cycles repeated in your relationships. The same pain appeared in different faces. The same emotional wounds resurfaced in different forms. Abandonment, betrayal, emotional inconsistency, feeling unseen, feeling unchosen. But now the cycle is breaking. And when karmic cycles break, they do not leave quietly. They fight to survive. That is why your spiritual battle feels so intense right now. Because your soul is standing at the edge of liberation. And somewhere beyond this emotional storm, your reunion energy is getting stronger. The signs are already appearing. The emotional purging. The sudden endings. The strange synchronicities. The dreams. The magnetic pull you cannot explain. None of it is accidental. You are being prepared for a love that requires the death of who you used to be. And although this battle feels overwhelming, one truth remains. The spiritual attacks increase most violently right before destiny manifests. So if your life feels like it is shaking, if your emotions feel heavier than ever, if everything false around you is collapsing at once, do not panic. Because for a chosen one, the final spiritual battle is often the clearest proof that the reunion is real. Chosen one of the deepest wounds you carry is not just heartbreak. It is the feeling that nobody has ever truly understood you. Not completely. Not in the way your soul desperately needed. Since childhood, you may have felt different without knowing why. While other people seemed comfortable fitting into groups, following trends, or pretending to be someone they were not, something inside you resisted it naturally. Even when you tried to blend in, part of you always felt emotionally disconnected from the world around you. You noticed things other people ignored. You felt energies people could not explain. You sensed when someone was lying even if their words sounded convincing. And because you carried that deep sensitivity, life often became overwhelming long before anyone realized what you were going through internally. Many chosen ones grew up feeling emotionally alone inside crowded rooms. Even inside their own families. Especially inside their own families. Perhaps you were the child who was told you were too sensitive. The one who cried deeply over things others dismissed casually. The one who absorbed tension inside the house even when nobody spoke about it openly. You may have walked through childhood constantly trying to earn love, approval, or emotional safety from people who themselves were emotionally wounded. And because of that, you learned something dangerous very early. You learned to silence yourself. You learned to hide your emotions so others would feel comfortable. You learned to shrink your spirit to avoid rejection. But no matter how much you tried to become what others expected, something inside you still felt unseen. That ache followed you into adulthood. And for many chosen ones, the pain became even worse in relationships. Because your soul does not love casually. You love deeply. Completely. Spiritually. When you care about someone, you invest emotionally in ways most people cannot comprehend. You try to understand their pain. You forgive too much. You remain loyal long after others would walk away. You hold on to hope even when your heart is exhausted. And unfortunately, this often attracts karmic relationships before divine union arrives. Why? Because wounded people are naturally drawn toward light. Your empathy became a magnet for emotionally unavailable individuals, narcissistic personalities, manipulators, and people who needed healing they refused to do themselves. Think about the relationships that hurt you most. How many times did you pour love into someone who only gave confusion in return? How many times did you become the emotional support system for people who disappeared the moment you needed support yourself? How many times did you stay loyal to individuals who secretly envied your spirit? Chosen ones often suffer betrayal not because they are weak, but because they naturally see the good in people before recognizing the danger. And that innocence becomes painful in a world filled with emotionally disconnected individuals. Perhaps you trusted someone who slowly drained your energy while pretending to love you. Perhaps you stayed in relationships where you constantly had to prove your worth. Perhaps you loved people who only appreciated your presence after losing access to your energy. These experiences leave deep scars on the soul, especially because chosen ones rarely receive closure. Instead, they receive lessons. And sometimes those lessons arrive through abandonment. One of the hardest emotional wounds for spiritually awakened souls is realizing that many people loved the healing they received from you, but not you yourself. They loved your attention, your compassion, your emotional availability, your ability to comfort them. But when it came time to reciprocate emotionally, they disappeared. This creates a devastating internal question. Why am I always the one who gives more? That question has haunted countless chosen ones for years. And over time, repeated disappointment creates emotional exhaustion. You begin doubting your instincts, doubting your heart, doubting whether genuine love even exists anymore. But what if those painful experiences were not evidence that you are unlovable? What if they were exposing the difference between karmic attachment and divine connection? Because karmic relationships teach through pain. Twin flame connections awaken through truth. Karmic relationships are built around unresolved wounds. They trigger insecurity, fear, obsession, emotional instability, and dependency. They often feel intense because they activate unhealed trauma. But divine connections feel different. Even during separation, there is spiritual recognition, an invisible pull, a sense that something deeper exists beneath physical circumstances. And before a chosen one can experience that level of sacred connection, the soul must first learn painful discernment. You had to learn the difference between attention and genuine love, between attachment and alignment, between emotional addiction and spiritual connection. That is why your past relationships often felt like emotional battlefields. They were classrooms for the soul. Still, none of this made the loneliness easier. Because the truth is, many chosen ones secretly carry exhaustion behind their strength. People often admire your resilience without understanding the pain required to build it. Nobody sees the nights you cried silently, while pretending to be strong for everyone else. Nobody sees the emotional breakdowns hidden behind your calm exterior. Nobody sees how many times you almost gave up after being betrayed by people you genuinely loved. And perhaps the most painful part is this. Some of the deepest wounds came from people you thought would protect you. Family members who misunderstood your spirit. Friends who mocked your dreams. Partners who made you feel emotionally invisible. You may have spent years feeling like the black sheep, the person who never quite fit into the expectations surrounding them. But chosen one, being different was never your flaw. It was your assignment. You were never designed to think like everyone else because your soul came here to awaken beyond collective patterns. That is why ordinary environments often feel spiritually suffocating to you. That is why shallow conversations drain your energy. That is why fake relationships exhaust you. Your soul craves truth. And once spiritual awakening begins, pretending becomes impossible. This is also why isolation becomes part of the journey. Not as punishment, but as preparation. Many chosen ones go through seasons where they feel separated from nearly everyone around them. Friendships fade, relationships end, familiar environments lose emotional meaning. Life becomes quieter. At first, this isolation feels cruel, but eventually, you realize something profound. The universe was removing distractions so you could finally hear your own soul clearly. Because as long as you remained surrounded by noise, manipulation, and emotional dependency, you could not fully align with your true path. Sometimes solitude is the birthplace of awakening. And during this lonely season, your intuition grows stronger. You begin recognizing patterns you ignored before. You stop chasing validation. You stop forcing connections. You stop begging people to understand your heart. And slowly, something powerful begins happening inside you. You start returning to yourself. This is the turning point many chosen ones experience before reunion energy intensifies. The wounded version of you sought external love to feel complete. But the awakened version begins discovering wholeness internally. And spiritually, this changes everything. Because divine union cannot fully manifest while you still abandon yourself trying to earn love from unavailable people. The soul lesson was never about becoming worthy of love. You were always worthy. The lesson was learning not to betray your own spirit in exchange for temporary affection. Read that again carefully. Many chosen ones spent years overgiving because they feared abandonment. But true spiritual alignment begins when you stop sacrificing your peace to maintain unhealthy connections. That is why the universe allowed certain betrayals to happen. Not to destroy you, but to wake you up. Some people had to leave, so your soul could finally stop chasing what was never meant to stay. And now, as this spiritual battle intensifies, old wounds may be resurfacing one final time. Memories return unexpectedly. Past heartbreaks replay emotionally. Moments of rejection suddenly feel fresh again. But this is happening because your soul is preparing for closure. You are releasing emotional residue that can no longer travel with you into your next chapter. The pain is surfacing because it is leaving. And even though you once felt misunderstood by nearly everyone around you, the truth is this: your soul was never truly alone. Every painful experience was shaping your discernment. Every betrayal strengthened your spiritual vision. Every heartbreak prepared your heart to recognize authentic connection when it finally arrives. Because one day, you will meet energy that does not confuse you, love that does not abandon you, connection that does not require self-destruction to maintain. And when that moment arrives, you will finally understand why your soul refused to settle for anything less. The loneliness was not evidence that you were forgotten. It was evidence that your spirit was being prepared for something rare. Chosen one, there is something your soul has been trying to understand for years. Why did your life have to hurt this much? Why did love always seem to arrive wrapped in lessons? Why did the people you trusted most become the ones who wounded you deepest? And why did every time you finally thought peace was coming, another emotional storm appeared? For a long time, you believed these experiences meant something was wrong with you. You blamed yourself for being too loving, too trusting, too emotional, too forgiving. But what if your pain was never random? What if every heartbreak, betrayal, abandonment, and disappointment was part of a spiritual process designed to awaken you? Because before a chosen one can enter divine union, the soul must go through purification. Not punishment, purification. And purification is rarely gentle. Think about gold being refined in fire. The heat does not destroy the gold, it removes the impurities hiding inside it. In the same way, your experiences were exposing emotional wounds, fears, attachments, and patterns that had been buried deep within your spirit for years. That is why your journey often felt repetitive. The faces changed, but the pain stayed familiar. Maybe one relationship triggered abandonment, another triggered insecurity, another triggered feelings of rejection, another forced you to confront your fear of being alone. At first, it felt like terrible luck, but spiritually, patterns repeat until lessons are learned. And many chosen ones unknowingly carried wounds that existed long before their twin flame journey ever began. Some of those wounds came from childhood, growing up emotionally unseen, feeling like love had to be earned, feeling responsible for other people's emotions, being praised for sacrificing yourself while neglecting your own needs. Over time, these experiences quietly shaped the way you loved. You became the giver, the healer, the over-explainer, the one who stayed too long hoping people would finally become who they promised to be. And because your heart carried such deep compassion, you often attracted wounded individuals who needed healing, but were unwilling to heal themselves. This is where karmic relationships enter the story. Many people misunderstand karmic connections. They think karmic relationships are simply bad relationships. But spiritually, karmic relationships are teachers. Painful teachers. They enter your life to expose unresolved wounds hidden inside your soul. That is why karmic connections often begin with intense attraction. The chemistry feels overwhelming. The emotional attachment becomes immediate. It feels magnetic, addictive, impossible to explain. But beneath the intensity, instability always exists. Confusion replaces clarity. You begin questioning yourself constantly. You overthink every message. You feel anxious without knowing why. One moment you feel loved. The next moment you feel emotionally abandoned. This emotional inconsistency is not love. It is trauma activation. And many chosen ones mistake emotional intensity for soul connection because their nervous systems became conditioned to chase unpredictable love. Think about how many times you ignored your intuition because your heart wanted the fantasy to be real. How many red flags did you excuse because you believed your love could heal someone? How many times did you stay after the universe already showed you signs to walk away? That was not weakness. It was unhealed hope. And unhealed hope often traps spiritually sensitive people inside cycles of suffering. You saw potential in people who were emotionally unavailable. You loved future versions of them that did not yet exist. You believed patience would eventually transform pain into peace. But some connections are not meant to last forever. Some exist only to awaken you. This is one of the hardest truths chosen ones must face. Not everyone you deeply loved was your divine partner. Some were karmic mirrors sent to reveal what still needed healing inside you. That relationship where you constantly begged for consistency. It exposed your fear of abandonment. The connection where you tolerated disrespect to avoid loneliness. It revealed your lack of self-worth. The person who manipulated your emotions while demanding unconditional understanding. They exposed the unhealthy boundaries your soul needed to strengthen. Pain became the teacher your comfort never could be. And although these lessons hurt deeply, they were preparing you for something your old self could not yet sustain. Because divine union requires emotional maturity. It requires spiritual discernment. It requires the ability to recognize love without abandoning yourself in the process. The universe could not bring your twin flame fully into alignment while you still confused suffering with devotion. That is why certain relationships had to collapse. Not because you failed, but because your soul outgrew them. And sometimes the collapse happened dramatically. Sudden betrayals, ghosting, third-party situations, unexpected endings, people changing overnight. Many chosen ones experienced relationships where everything seemed beautiful in the beginning, only for hidden truths to emerge later. And when those truths surfaced, the heartbreak felt unbearable. Not just because you lost someone, but because you lost the future you imagined with them. That grief cuts differently. You were not mourning only the person. You were mourning the dream, the vision, the emotional safety you hoped would finally last. But chosen one, listen carefully. Illusions must break before divine truth can enter your life. And sometimes the universe destroys what your ego wanted in order to protect what your soul truly needs. There were moments when you begged the universe to save relationships that were secretly destroying your spirit. Moments when you thought losing someone would break you forever. But look at yourself now. You survived. Even after nights where you cried until your chest physically hurt. Even after moments where silence felt unbearable. Even after betrayal shattered your trust completely. You survived. And survival transformed you. Because pain changes spiritually awakened people differently. Some people become bitter after heartbreak. But chosen ones often become wiser, more intuitive, more discerning, more connected to truth. You began noticing patterns faster. You started recognizing manipulation earlier. You stopped romanticizing emotional inconsistency. You learned that real love should not constantly leave you confused, anxious, and emotionally unstable. And perhaps most importantly, you began realizing your worth cannot depend on whether someone chooses you. That realization marks the beginning of spiritual liberation. Because many chosen ones spent years trying to earn love from emotionally unavailable people. They believed if they loved harder, sacrificed more, stayed longer, or proved themselves enough, they would finally receive the consistency they craved. But healthy love is not earned through suffering. It flows naturally through alignment. This is the lesson karmic cycles were trying to teach you all along. And now, as you approach this final spiritual battle, old wounds may suddenly reappear one last time. You may think about people you already released emotionally. Memories may surface unexpectedly. Past heartbreaks may revisit your spirit through dreams, emotions, or synchronicities. Do not panic when this happens. It does not mean you are moving backward. It means unresolved energy is leaving your system. Before divine union, the soul purges emotional residue accumulated through years of pain, attachment, and survival patterns. This purge can feel overwhelming, because your spirit is preparing to hold a higher frequency of love. And higher love cannot coexist with old emotional poison. That is why your life feels like it is being emotionally reorganized. People are leaving. Habits are changing. Perspectives are shifting. The version of you who accepted crumbs can no longer survive inside your new consciousness. And yes, this transformation can feel lonely, because healing often separates you from environments where suffering once felt normal. You begin realizing how many relationships were built around trauma bonding instead of authentic connection. You begin recognizing how often you abandoned your own needs to keep others comfortable. You stop tolerating energy that drains your spirit. And suddenly, the life that once felt familiar no longer fits your soul. That discomfort is part of awakening. You are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself beneath years of conditioning. Every painful experience brought you closer to this realization. Every betrayal strengthened your discernment. Every disappointment pushed you toward deeper self-awareness. The pain was never meaningless. It was preparing your soul to finally recognize the difference between karmic attachment and divine alignment. Because when true divine love enters your life, it will not require you to betray yourself to keep it. It will not force you to beg for emotional consistency. It will not thrive on confusion, manipulation, or fear. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you will understand something that once seemed impossible. Love was never supposed to hurt the way karmic cycles hurt you. The suffering was not your destiny. The suffering was your awakening. Chosen one of the most painful parts of the spiritual journey is not the heartbreak. It is the waiting, the silence, the delays that make you question whether the universe has forgotten you completely. Because deep inside your soul, you felt something was meant for you. You sensed a connection beyond logic. You felt moments of alignment so powerful that they could not be explained through coincidence alone. And yet, every time you thought reunion was finally close, something happened. Timing failed. Distance appeared. Communication collapsed. Fear surfaced. Life interrupted the connection again. And slowly, disappointment began turning into confusion. You started asking yourself difficult questions. If this connection is real, why has it taken so long? Why would the universe show me something so deep only to separate us? Why does divine love feel so painful? These questions haunt many chosen ones because the human heart struggles to understand spiritual timing. But what if the delays were never rejection? What if the delays were protection? Because the truth is, divine union cannot arrive fully until both souls are capable of sustaining it. And many chosen ones underestimate how much healing, growth, ego death, and emotional transformation must occur before reunion becomes stable. You wanted the connection immediately because your heart recognized it. But your soul understood something your emotions could not yet see. The earlier version of you would not have survived the intensity of true divine union. Read that carefully. Sometimes the universe delays blessings because receiving them too early would destroy them. Think about who you were several years ago. Were you fully healed? Did you truly know your worth? Could you maintain healthy boundaries consistently? Had you fully released your fear of abandonment? Were you emotionally independent? Or were you still seeking validation through relationships, attention, and external reassurance? Most chosen ones begin their journey carrying deep emotional wounds beneath their spiritual awareness. They recognize soul connections before they recognize their own unresolved trauma. And that creates dangerous imbalance. Because when wounded people encounter intense spiritual connection, they often become consumed by obsession, fear, attachment, and emotional dependency instead of alignment. This is why separation becomes necessary. Not as punishment, as preparation. Separation exposes what attachment hides. When the connection pulls away, all unresolved wounds rise to the surface. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being unworthy, fear of losing love, fear of not being enough. And although this process feels cruel emotionally, It reveals exactly what still needs healing inside both souls. Many chosen ones spend years thinking the delay exists because the universe is testing their patience. But spiritually, the delay exists because transformation takes time. Real transformation. Not temporary change. Not surface-level healing. Soul-level reconstruction. The universe is not preparing you merely for romance. It is preparing you for sacred alignment. And sacred alignment requires the destruction of illusions. That is why so many parts of your old life began collapsing simultaneously. Relationships ended. Friendships faded. Career paths shifted. Priorities changed. Your old identity slowly stopped feeling authentic. At first, these changes felt terrifying because humans naturally cling to familiarity, even when familiarity is painful. But spiritually, your soul was being redirected. Imagine trying to pour pure water into a contaminated container. The water itself may be clean, but the container would corrupt it immediately. In the same way, divine love cannot fully enter a life still filled with toxic cycles. Emotional instability, self-abandonment, and unresolved karmic patterns. The container must be cleansed first. That cleansing process is what many chosen ones mistake for delay. But delay and preparation are not the same thing. Preparation has purpose. And if you look honestly at your journey, you will realize something profound. You are not the same person you were when this connection first entered your life. Back then, you may have chased people who gave mixed signals. You may have confused emotional intensity with love. You may have tolerated inconsistency because you feared loneliness. You may have overgiven hoping someone would finally choose you completely. But now, something inside you has changed. Pain forced your awakening. You began recognizing unhealthy patterns faster. You started valuing peace more than emotional chaos. You stopped romanticizing unavailable people. And slowly, your soul began learning one of the most important spiritual lessons of all. Love should not require self-destruction. This lesson had to become part of your consciousness before reunion energy could stabilize. Because divine union is not built upon desperation. It is built upon wholeness. Two souls cannot unite healthily while both are still trying to use each other to escape inner emptiness. And this is where many chosen ones misunderstand the twin flame journey completely. They believe reunion itself will heal them. But reunion is not the beginning of healing. Healing is what makes reunion possible. The universe needed you to become emotionally stronger first, spiritually wiser first, more discerning first. Otherwise, you would have carried old wounds directly into sacred connection, repeating the same toxic cycles in a new spiritual form. That is why certain endings became necessary. That is why people were removed from your life unexpectedly. That is why your loneliness deepened during certain seasons. Isolation was teaching you how to reconnect with your own soul before merging energetically with another. Because if you cannot hold peace alone, you will unconsciously seek relationships to escape yourself. And divine union can never be built upon escapism. It must be built upon truth. Now here is the part many chosen ones do not realize. Your twin flame was also being prepared. While you were healing emotionally, they were facing their own spiritual battles, their own fears, their own karmic cycles, their own ego deaths. Many times, chosen ones imagine their counterpart living peacefully while they alone suffer the pain of separation. But spiritually aligned souls mirror each other's evolution, even when separated physically. If you were confronting abandonment wounds, they were likely confronting fear of vulnerability. If you were learning self-worth, they were learning accountability. If you were releasing emotional dependency, they were learning emotional openness. The lessons may look different externally, but both souls are evolving simultaneously beneath the surface. And sometimes the universe separates two people because one soul awakens faster than the other. This imbalance creates temporary distance, not permanent loss. Because reunion cannot happen while one soul runs from truth and the other loses themselves chasing it. Both energies must mature. Both spirits must awaken. Both hearts must break open enough to sustain authentic connection. This is why timing matters spiritually. You may have met your twin flame years before reunion becomes physically possible. The encounter activates awakening. The separation activates healing. And eventually, alignment activates reunion. But the middle stage, the waiting, is where many people lose faith. Because waiting feels empty when you do not understand what the universe is doing behind the scenes. Yet if reunion had happened too early, the connection may have collapsed completely under the weight of unhealed wounds. The delay protected the future. There were moments you begged the universe to bring someone back immediately. Moments you cried, prayed, manifested, searched for signs, and exhausted yourself emotionally trying to force divine timing into human timing. But now, looking back, can you honestly say you were ready back then? Or were you still emotionally attached to versions of yourself that no longer exist now? This is why spiritual growth often feels lonely. The universe isolates you from distractions while rebuilding your inner foundation. And during this process, you begin discovering that your worth was never dependent on another person arriving. You stop needing external validation to feel complete. You stop chasing certainty from people who send mixed signals. You stop begging for love that requires suffering. And ironically, this is often the exact moment reunion energy strengthens. Because attachment weakens alignment. But inner peace strengthens it. The universe does not respond to desperation. It responds to energetic readiness. So if things have felt delayed lately, if the connection seems paused, if silence has replaced movement, do not assume nothing is happening. Some of the most important spiritual transformations occur invisibly. Seeds grow underground long before flowers appear above the surface. And your soul has been growing beneath the pain this entire time. The delays were not evidence that you were abandoned. They were evidence that destiny was being carefully prepared. Because when divine union finally arrives, it must enter a version of your life capable of sustaining the blessing. Not the wounded version of you who begged for love, but the awakened version of you who finally understands that real love flows through alignment, not force. And one day, when everything finally makes sense, you will realize something that changes your entire perspective forever. The waiting was not wasting your time. The waiting was building your soul. Chosen one, the final spiritual battle rarely announces itself clearly. It does not arrive with a warning written across the sky. Instead, it enters your life quietly at first, through strange emotions, sudden endings, unexplained exhaustion, vivid dreams, and a feeling that reality itself is shifting around you. And the most confusing part is this. Externally, your life may appear normal. But internally, your soul feels like it is standing in the middle of a storm. If you have reached this stage of the journey, you already know exactly what this feels like. Something inside you changed recently. You cannot fully explain it, but your spirit knows. The old version of you is disappearing. And before divine reunion manifests physically, the spiritual realm begins reorganizing your entire energetic world. That process creates signs. Powerful signs. The problem is that many chosen ones mistake these signs for emotional instability, bad luck, depression, or failure. But spiritually, these experiences often indicate that the final phase of transformation has begun. The first sign is emotional intensity without clear explanation. Have you noticed how your emotions suddenly come in overwhelming waves? One moment you feel peaceful. The next moment grief crashes into your chest for no visible reason. You may suddenly think about people from your past you have not considered in years. Old memories resurface unexpectedly. Certain songs trigger deep emotional reactions. Random moments make your eyes fill with tears even when nothing bad happened externally. This emotional purge confuses many chosen ones because it feels irrational. But spiritually, your soul is releasing trapped emotional energy accumulated through years of pain, suppression, and karmic attachment. Before reunion, unresolved emotions rise to the surface so they can finally leave your system completely. And yes, it feels exhausting. There may be nights where you feel emotionally heavy without understanding why. Nights where loneliness suddenly feels unbearable even after weeks of feeling strong. Moments where you question your entire path because the emotional pressure becomes overwhelming. But this does not mean you are breaking. It means your soul is detoxing emotionally. The second sign is unusual exhaustion. Not ordinary tiredness. Soul exhaustion. You sleep and still wake up drained. Your body rests, but your spirit feels busy all night. Some chosen ones experience headaches, body heaviness, vivid dreams, sudden anxiety, or periods of extreme fatigue during this stage. And what makes it frustrating is that other people may not understand it at all. They may tell you to stop overthinking. They may assume you are simply stressed. But spiritually awakened souls often experience energetic shifts physically because the body absorbs emotional and spiritual transformation together. Your nervous system is recalibrating. Your energy field is changing. And transformation requires enormous spiritual energy. The third sign is accelerated endings. This is one of the clearest indicators that the final battle has begun. Suddenly, things that once felt stable start collapsing rapidly. Friendships end unexpectedly. Relationships become tense. Jobs lose meaning. Environments feel energetically unbearable. Conversations with certain people leave you emotionally drained almost instantly. And strangely, you no longer have the energy to fake connection anymore. This part can feel terrifying because humans naturally fear loss. But spiritually, accelerated endings occur when your soul can no longer energetically align with environments built for an outdated version of you. The universe starts removing people, habits, and situations that would interfere with your next phase of evolution. At first, you may try to hold on to these connections. You may attempt to repair dynamics that no longer resonate with your spirit. But eventually, your soul becomes too exhausted to continue forcing what is no longer aligned. And this is where isolation begins. Many chosen ones experience a season where they suddenly feel separated from almost everyone. Emotionally, even around people, they feel alone. This isolation is not punishment. It is spiritual preparation. The universe removes noise so you can hear your intuition clearly. Because before reunion, your inner voice must become stronger than outside opinions. The fourth sign is synchronicities increasing dramatically. Repeating numbers. Names appearing everywhere. Strange coincidences that feel too precise to ignore. You think about someone, and they contact you moments later. You hear messages through songs, conversations, dreams, or random encounters that feel directly connected to your situation. Some chosen ones repeatedly see numbers like 1111, 222, 333, or 444 during periods of intense transformation. Others experience symbols connected to their twin flame appearing constantly, specific places, phrases, animals, initials, birthdays, or spiritual signs that repeat beyond normal probability. At first, you try to dismiss these experiences logically, but eventually, the frequency becomes impossible to ignore. Why does this happen? Because synchronicities are often signs of energetic alignment. The closer your soul moves toward transformation, the more spiritually aware you become of invisible patterns already surrounding your life. The fifth sign is intense dreams. Dreams become emotionally vivid during this stage because the subconscious mind opens more deeply. During spiritual transformation, some chosen ones dream about their twin flame repeatedly. Others experience symbolic dreams involving water, mirrors, houses, death, travel, or reunions. Sometimes the dreams feel more emotionally real than waking life itself. You may wake up carrying emotions that linger for hours afterward. And occasionally, dreams reveal truths your conscious mind has been avoiding. Fear, attachment, longing, unresolved pain. The subconscious speaks loudly during spiritual awakening because the soul communicates symbolically, long before the mind fully understands. This is also why many chosen ones begin sensing their twin flame emotionally from a distance. Sudden emotional waves appear out of nowhere. You feel connected to someone even during physical separation. Certain days feel energetically intense without explanation. And although logic struggles to explain these experiences, spiritually connected souls often mirror emotional states unconsciously. The sixth sign is heightened intuition. This may be the strongest sign of all. You suddenly know things before they happen. You sense energy shifts immediately. People's true intentions become obvious faster. Your tolerance for fake energy disappears almost completely. Conversations feel different. Rooms feel different. Even social media, music, and environments begin affecting your energy more intensely. Because once awakening accelerates, your soul stops ignoring what your intuition already recognizes. This can feel lonely at first. You begin seeing through people more clearly. You recognize manipulation faster. You notice emotional masks others hide behind. And suddenly, relationships you once tolerated become spiritually exhausting. Many chosen ones struggle during this phase because awakening destroys illusions permanently. Once you truly see something, you cannot unsee it again. The seventh sign is spiritual attacks through fear and doubt. This is extremely common before major breakthroughs. Suddenly your mind becomes louder. Fear intensifies. Doubt returns unexpectedly. You question whether your journey is real. You fear being abandoned permanently. You wonder whether you imagine the connection entirely. These thoughts feel overwhelming because your old survival patterns fight desperately to regain control. Remember this carefully. The ego fears transformation because transformation requires surrender. The closer you move toward higher alignment, the louder fear becomes temporarily. Why? Because your old identity senses it is losing power. The version of you built around fear, attachment, insecurity, and emotional dependency cannot survive this next chapter. And that creates internal resistance. Many chosen ones mistake this fear for intuition. But fear contracts. Intuition guides. There is a difference. Fear says, you are not enough. Intuition says, you are transforming. Fear says, you are losing everything. Intuition says, you are releasing what no longer belongs. The final spiritual battle is ultimately a battle between these two voices. And perhaps the clearest sign of all is this. Despite everything falling apart externally, something inside you still refuses to give up. Even during emotional exhaustion. Even during silence. Even during confusion. Part of your soul still feels connected to something greater unfolding beneath the surface. That quiet inner knowing is important. Because chosen ones often survive seasons that should have broken them completely. And the reason they survive is because the soul recognizes destiny long before the physical world catches up to it. So if your life feels strange lately, if emotions feel heavier, if endings are accelerating, if your intuition is louder than ever, if your spirit feels both exhausted and awakened simultaneously, do not assume you are lost. You may simply be standing inside the final spiritual battle before everything changes. Because before reunion manifests physically, the universe often dismantles every false foundation first. And although the process feels chaotic, painful, and lonely, it is also proof that your soul is approaching transformation powerful enough to alter the course of your entire life forever. Chosen one, there is a reason the pressure around your life suddenly became heavier the moment you started healing. There is a reason certain people became distant after you began reclaiming your power. There is a reason confusion intensified right before clarity arrived. Because darkness always reacts when light begins expanding. And one of the greatest misunderstandings on the spiritual journey is believing that resistance means you are moving in the wrong direction. In reality, resistance often appears because you are finally moving in the right one. Think about it carefully. Why did some people only become uncomfortable when you started setting boundaries? Why did certain relationships collapse the moment you stopped abandoning yourself to keep others happy? Why did old temptations suddenly return right when you began healing emotionally? Because transformation threatens every system that benefited from your wounded version. The spiritually exhausted version of you was easier to control. The insecure version of you accepted less. The lonely version of you tolerated emotional inconsistency. The unhealed version of you chased validation instead of truth. But now, your spirit is awakening. And awakening changes everything. You begin seeing through manipulation faster. You stop romanticizing toxic behavior. You stop shrinking yourself so others can remain comfortable. You stop apologizing for needing peace. And once this shift begins, resistance increases immediately. That resistance may not always look supernatural. Sometimes it appears through people. Unexpected conflict, jealousy, emotional attacks, misunderstandings, energy-draining conversations, people projecting their pain onto you for no clear reason. And perhaps the most painful part is that these attacks often come from individuals you genuinely loved. Family members who suddenly criticize your growth. Friends who become cold once you stop overgiving. Partners who react negatively when you stop tolerating disrespect. At first, this behavior feels confusing. You wonder, what did I do wrong? But spiritually, the answer is often simple. Your energy changed, and not everyone can follow you into higher alignment. Many people feel comfortable around wounded souls because wounded souls are easier to predict, easier to manipulate, easier to emotionally control. But healed energy forces truth into the open. And truth makes unresolved people uncomfortable. Have you noticed how some individuals only supported you when you were struggling? When you were confused, broken, emotionally dependent, or insecure, they felt safe around you. But the moment you started healing, something shifted. Suddenly they became distant, critical, competitive, cold. This happens because your healing silently exposes what others refuse to heal within themselves. Your growth becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look into it. This is why darkness attacks before reunion. Because divine union requires authenticity. Anything false inside your life becomes unstable in the presence of awakening. The masks fall. Hidden jealousy surfaces. Manipulation becomes obvious. Toxic patterns reveal themselves clearly. And while this process is painful emotionally, it is also necessary spiritually. Because the universe cannot align you with sacred connection while you remain surrounded by energies designed to keep you spiritually asleep. That is why your discernment has become sharper lately. You feel energy differently now. Certain conversations leave you drained instantly. Certain environments suddenly feel heavy. Some people exhaust your spirit after only a few minutes around them. Meanwhile, solitude feels safer than fake connection. This shift is not random. Your soul is becoming more sensitive because it is preparing for higher energetic alignment. And higher alignment requires energetic honesty. The problem is that many chosen ones misunderstand this stage completely. They think, why is everything getting harder if I'm healing? But healing does not immediately create peace. First, it creates exposure. Imagine cleaning a dark room that has remained untouched for years. The moment light enters, dust becomes visible everywhere. The light did not create the dirt. It revealed what was already there. Your awakening is doing the same thing. The chaos surfacing around you existed beneath the surface all along. You are simply seeing clearly now. And clarity changes your entire life. This is why so many chosen ones experience intense spiritual loneliness before reunion. Not because they are cursed, but because their soul can no longer comfortably remain inside false environments. You begin craving depth instead of distraction, truth instead of performance, peace instead of emotional games. And unfortunately, many people are deeply attached to illusion. Some people build entire identities around avoiding emotional truth. So when your energy changes, it disrupts those patterns unconsciously. This is why people sometimes react aggressively to your transformation, even when you never attacked them personally. Your existence reminds them of what they avoid within themselves. And spiritually, unresolved people often resist mirrors that expose their inner wounds. Now here is something even deeper many chosen ones do not realize. The closer you move toward reunion, the more old karmic energies attempt to pull you backward. This is why people from your past suddenly reappear unexpectedly. Old relationships return. Toxic ex-partners contact you again. Temptations resurface. Emotional confusion intensifies. It feels almost as if the universe is testing whether you will repeat old cycles one final time. And spiritually, that is exactly what is happening. Before new alignment fully enters your life, old attachments often return seeking re-entry. Not because they belong in your future, but because your soul must demonstrate it has truly evolved beyond them. This is the difference between temporary healing and true transformation. Temporary healing still craves familiar pain. True transformation chooses peace, even when loneliness temporarily follows. That choice changes everything, because many chosen ones spent years addicted to emotional chaos without realizing it. Chaos felt familiar. Uncertainty felt normal. Inconsistency felt exciting. Why? Because wounded nervous systems often confuse instability with passion. But divine union cannot grow inside emotional addiction. Sacred love requires emotional safety, spiritual maturity, and inner stability. That is why karmic patterns must collapse completely before reunion becomes sustainable. And collapse rarely feels comfortable. Some chosen ones lose entire social circles during this stage. Others experience sudden career shifts, emotional breakdowns, relocations, or deep identity crises. Why? Because your old life cannot follow you into your new alignment unchanged. The universe removes what no longer matches your future frequency. At first, this feels like loss. Later, you realize it was liberation. And perhaps one of the hardest parts of this battle is that your twin flame may also trigger fear. During this phase, the connection itself becomes overwhelming. The intensity activates insecurities both souls still carry internally. Fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of surrender, fear of losing control. This is why many twin flame connections experience periods of silence, separation, or emotional distance before reunion stabilizes. Not because love disappeared, but because unresolved wounds surfaced for healing. And when wounds surface, the ego often reacts through avoidance. Many chosen ones take this personally. They assume, if this connection were real, it would be easy. But spiritually transformative connections are rarely easy at first. Why? Because they force both souls to confront parts of themselves they spent years avoiding. Your twin flame reflects your deepest wounds and highest potential simultaneously. That mirror effect can feel terrifying before healing occurs. And this is exactly why darkness intensifies before reunion. Because true union destroys illusion permanently. It forces both souls toward authenticity. And anything inside either person built upon fear begins collapsing under the pressure of awakening. But here is the beautiful truth hidden beneath this painful process. The attacks increase because your spirit is becoming harder to control. The confusion intensifies because clarity is approaching. The old cycles fight harder because they are dying. And despite everything you have endured, something inside you continues moving forward anyway. That quiet resilience matters, because many people abandon themselves the moment life becomes uncomfortable. But chosen ones continue evolving through pain. Even exhausted, they keep healing. Even heartbroken, they keep growing. Even confused, part of their soul still senses something sacred unfolding beyond the chaos. And that inner knowing is not accidental. Your spirit recognizes destiny before your physical reality fully catches up to it. So if people suddenly seem strange around you, if old patterns are resurfacing, if emotional attacks have intensified, if isolation feels heavier, if everything false around you is collapsing rapidly, do not immediately assume you are cursed. You may simply be approaching the final threshold before transformation becomes irreversible. Because before divine reunion manifests externally, every false foundation inside your life must be exposed first. Not to destroy you, but to free you. And one day, when the chaos finally settles, you will look back at this painful season and realize something extraordinary. The darkness attacked because your light was becoming impossible to stop. Chosen one. One of the most painful parts of this journey is believing you are carrying the entire emotional weight alone. You feel the connection constantly. You sense the energy shifts. You experience the dreams, synchronicities, emotional waves, and spiritual exhaustion. Meanwhile, your twin flame may appear silent, distant, disconnected, or emotionally unavailable. And because of that silence, the mind begins creating terrifying questions. Do they even feel this connection anymore? Have they forgotten me? What if this entire journey only mattered to me? These questions become especially intense during separation because physical distance creates emotional uncertainty, and when the heart cannot see what is happening externally, fear begins filling the empty spaces with worst-case scenarios. But chosen one, listen carefully. Silence does not mean disconnection. Distance does not mean absence. And emotional avoidance does not mean the soul bond disappeared. In fact, many twin flames feel the connection most intensely during separation. They simply process it differently. This is one of the greatest misunderstandings surrounding divine connections. People assume both souls will awaken emotionally in the exact same way at the exact same time. But spiritual awakening rarely unfolds symmetrically. Often, one soul becomes consciously aware of the connection earlier. One soul begins healing sooner. One soul recognizes the spiritual purpose before the other fully understands what is happening internally. This imbalance creates confusion, especially for the awakened chosen one who feels everything deeply. You may interpret their silence as indifference. But spiritually, silence often hides internal chaos. Because twin flame energy is overwhelming when the soul is not fully prepared to handle it. Imagine meeting someone who unconsciously reflects every hidden wound, fear, insecurity, and emotional truth buried inside you. That level of connection does not feel casual. It shakes the ego completely. And for many people, the ego reacts to overwhelming spiritual intensity through avoidance. This is why the runner dynamic exists in so many twin flame journeys. The runner is not always running from you. Sometimes they are running from themselves. Running from vulnerability, running from emotional exposure, running from feelings they cannot logically explain, running from the fear of losing control. Because divine connections force emotional honesty in ways ordinary relationships do not. A twin flame connection activates everything unresolved inside both souls simultaneously. And that activation can feel terrifying before healing occurs. You may have noticed this already. The connection between you never felt normal. No matter how much time passed. No matter how much distance existed. No matter how many distractions entered your life. Something about the connection remained emotionally alive beneath the surface. That persistence is what confuses the logical mind. Because ordinary connections fade naturally over time. But soul connections operate differently. They leave energetic imprints. And even during separation, both souls continue influencing each other spiritually. This is why many chosen ones experience sudden emotional waves that seem to come from nowhere. You could be having a peaceful day, and suddenly sadness hits your chest unexpectedly. Or intense longing appears without external trigger. Or you feel anxiety, emotional heaviness, or restlessness for reasons you cannot explain logically. Sometimes these emotional shifts are connected to your twin flame's internal state. Spiritually connected souls often mirror emotions unconsciously across distance. And while skeptics may dismiss this idea, many awakened individuals experience it repeatedly throughout the journey. You think about the moments before they contact you. You dream about them during emotionally significant periods. You feel their energy strongly right before major life events occur. The connection behaves almost like an invisible thread stretching across physical separation. And this becomes even more intense during the final spiritual battle. Why? Because both souls are approaching transformation simultaneously. Even if externally your paths seem disconnected, Spiritually, the bond becomes increasingly active beneath the surface. This is why synchronicities often increase dramatically before reunion. Both souls begin awakening more deeply at the same time. The emotional tension intensifies. Dream activity increases. Telepathic feelings become stronger. Memories resurface unexpectedly. The universe begins aligning internal shifts before external movement appears physically. But here is where many chosen ones suffer unnecessarily. They focus entirely on physical confirmation. They need messages, reassurance, communication, visible proof. And when those things temporarily disappear, fear convinces them the connection must be over. But spiritual transformation rarely happens loudly at first. Much of the deepest healing occurs invisibly. Your twin flame may appear distant externally, while internally going through complete emotional collapse and awakening. They may be questioning their identity, facing unresolved childhood wounds, confronting karmic relationships, experiencing emotional confusion they cannot fully explain to anyone. Remember this carefully. Not everyone processes spiritual awakening consciously. Some people feel it emotionally before understanding it mentally. Others resist it completely at first because it disrupts everything familiar about their lives. This is especially true for individuals who spent years emotionally disconnected from themselves. When divine connection enters their life, it forces emotions they previously suppressed to rise to the surface. That process can feel emotionally violent. And many runners withdraw because they do not yet know how to hold the intensity of what they feel. This does not excuse harmful behavior. It simply explains the spiritual psychology behind it. Because true twin flame journeys are not fantasy love stories built upon perfection. They are transformational experiences designed to awaken both souls. An awakening requires confrontation with truth. Sometimes painful truth. The truth about fear. The truth about ego. The truth about emotional wounds. The truth about self-worth. The truth about avoidance patterns. And during this stage, both souls often trigger each other deeply without even trying. You may feel abandoned while they feel overwhelmed. You may crave closeness while they fear vulnerability. You may seek reassurance while they struggle internally with emotional surrender. This creates energetic tension that can feel unbearable during separation. But separation itself serves a purpose. It teaches both souls lessons they could not learn while emotionally entangled. For the awakened chosen one, separation often teaches self-love, detachment, boundaries, and inner wholeness. For the runner, separation often forces emotional awakening, accountability, vulnerability, and confrontation with suppressed feelings. Both souls evolve differently, but both are evolving. And this is the part many people fail to understand. Your twin flame is not spiritually untouched simply because they remain silent. Silence can hide enormous internal transformation. Some people process pain privately. Some awaken slowly. Some resist until life forces them to confront what they avoided emotionally. And often, the closer reunion becomes, the more emotionally intense their inner battle grows. Because the soul recognizes what the ego fears. The soul recognizes home. But the ego fears surrendering control completely. That is why many runners temporarily choose distractions, karmic relationships, work, isolation, or emotional avoidance during certain stages of the journey. Not because the connection is fake, but because the connection is too real to ignore comfortably. Ordinary attraction can be controlled. Divine connection cannot. It reaches places inside the soul that no external distraction fully silences. And eventually life itself begins forcing emotional truth to the surface. This is why many runners return after periods of silence transformed emotionally. Pain changes them. Loss changes them. Separation changes them. And during the final spiritual battle, both souls begin feeling the pull toward alignment more intensely than ever before. This is also why you may suddenly feel your twin flame emotionally stronger lately even without physical contact. Their energy enters your awareness unexpectedly. You think about them constantly without trying. Their presence feels spiritually close despite physical distance. This energetic pull increases when timelines begin shifting toward reunion. But chosen one, here is the lesson your soul must understand clearly. Do not lose yourself waiting for another person to awaken. Because reunion cannot stabilize while one soul abandons themselves emotionally chasing the other. The purpose of this journey was never obsession. It was transformation. The connection was meant to lead you back to your own soul first. And ironically, the moment many chosen ones fully reclaim themselves is often the moment reunion energy accelerates. Why? Because attachment weakens alignment. Desperation creates resistance. Fear clouds intuition. But inner wholeness creates magnetic stability. Your twin flame can feel that energetic shift too. Even from a distance. When you stop chasing. When you stop begging. When you stop abandoning yourself emotionally. Something changes in the connection. The energy becomes calmer. Clearer. More balanced. Because divine union is not built through force. It unfolds through alignment. And right now, even if your twin flame appears distant externally, their soul is still participating in this transformation beside you. The connection is still evolving beneath the silence. The spiritual battle is affecting both of you. Both hearts are being reshaped. Both souls are being prepared. And although separation may have convinced you that you were walking this path alone, the truth is far more profound. Your twin flame has been feeling this journey too, even in the moments they lacked the courage to. Say it out loud. Chosen one, before divine reunion can fully enter your life, something painful but necessary must happen first. The old version of you must collapse. Not partially, completely. And this is the stage of the journey that frightens many souls the most. Because spiritual transformation does not always feel peaceful while it is happening. Sometimes it feels like losing everything you once thought defined you. Your identity begins changing. Your priorities shift. People you once loved no longer feel aligned. Dreams you chased for years suddenly feel empty. Even your relationship with yourself begins transforming in ways you never expected. At first, this collapse feels terrifying because the human mind craves certainty. It wants stability, familiarity, predictability, but the soul does not evolve through comfort alone. The soul evolves through surrender. And surrender often looks like destruction before it becomes rebirth. This is why many chosen ones experience what feels like a complete unraveling right before major spiritual breakthroughs occur. Life becomes unstable, emotionally overwhelming, confusing. Everything that once felt solid begins cracking beneath your feet. And the hardest part is that nobody around you fully understands what you are going through. Internally. From the outside, people may think you are simply changing careers, ending relationships, or becoming more withdrawn. But spiritually, something much deeper is happening. Your soul is dismantling false identities. For years, you survived by becoming who others needed you to be. The peacemaker, the caretaker, Lightworker, the emotionally strong one, the person who tolerated pain quietly while carrying everyone else's burdens. But now, your spirit can no longer survive inside those masks. The collapse begins the moment your soul refuses to betray itself any longer. And this is why your old life suddenly feels emotionally unbearable. Conversations that once felt normal now drain your energy. Relationships built on emotional imbalance begin falling apart. Jobs that once gave you security start feeling spiritually empty. Even environments you once considered home begin feeling energetically heavy. This happens because your vibration is changing. The old structures in your life were built for a previous version of you, a version rooted in survival instead of alignment. But survival mode cannot follow you into divine union. You're being called into something higher now. And higher alignment demands truth. Real truth. Not performance. Not illusion. Not emotional self-abandonment disguised as love. That is why collapse becomes necessary. Because the universe cannot place sacred connection into a life still built upon false foundations. Imagine trying to build a temple on unstable ground. No matter how beautiful the structure appears externally, eventually it will crack beneath the pressure because the foundation itself was weak. The same thing happens spiritually. If your life is built around fear, people-pleasing, emotional dependency, unresolved trauma, or denial of your authentic self, divine union cannot stabilize there. The foundation must be rebuilt first. And rebuilding requires demolition. This is why so many chosen ones experience intense losses before reunion. Some lose relationships they thought would last forever. Others lose careers that once defined their identity. Some move cities unexpectedly. Others experience emotional breakdowns that completely alter their perspective on life. At first, these experiences feel like punishment. But later, you realize they were liberation in disguise. Because many of the things you lost were secretly keeping you spiritually trapped. You simply could not see it while emotionally attached to them. Think about certain relationships from your past. How often did you silence your true feelings to avoid conflict? How many times did you tolerate emotional inconsistency because you feared loneliness? How often did you sacrifice your peace trying to maintain connection with people who only loved fragments of you? That was not alignment. That was survival. And survival patterns eventually collapse under spiritual awakening. This is why healing feels so uncomfortable. Because awakening destroys the identities built around emotional protection. You stop pretending. You stop shrinking yourself. You stop chasing validation from people incapable of giving genuine love. And suddenly, your old life no longer fits your soul. That realization creates grief. Real grief. Because even unhealthy identities feel familiar after years of carrying them. Many chosen ones mourn versions of themselves they know they can no longer return to. The version who tolerated breadcrumbs. The version who begged to be chosen. The version who stayed silent to keep peace. The version who overgave hoping love would finally feel safe. That old self is dying now. And spiritual death is painful. But it is also sacred. Because something new is being born underneath the collapse. A more authentic version of you. A version no longer controlled by fear. A version capable of receiving love without self-abandonment. A version aligned with truth instead of emotional survival. This transformation changes everything. And it also changes the way you experience the twin flame connection itself. Earlier in the journey, you may have approached the connection through attachment, fear, longing, or emotional dependency. You may have believed reunion alone would heal your pain. But now, after all this collapse, something inside you is shifting. You begin realizing that no relationship can save you from yourself. No external person can complete wounds you refuse to heal internally. And paradoxically, this realization brings you closer to divine union than obsession ever could. Because true union is not built upon emotional desperation. It is built upon inner wholeness. This is why so many chosen ones enter a period of deep solitude before reunion. The universe removes distractions so the soul can rebuild itself authentically. During this stage, you may spend more time alone than ever before. And at first, loneliness feels unbearable. You miss old connections. You question your path. You wonder whether the isolation will ever end. But slowly, something extraordinary begins happening. You start hearing your own soul clearly. Without constant outside noise, your intuition strengthens. You reconnect with parts of yourself buried beneath years of emotional exhaustion. You begin discovering what actually brings you peace, not what society conditioned you to chase. And for the first time, you stop seeking your identity entirely through other people's approval. This is the rebirth stage. Quiet, invisible, but incredibly powerful. And although the outside world may still look chaotic temporarily, internally your soul is becoming stronger than ever before. That strength matters because divine union requires emotional stability. Not perfection, but stability. The old version of you loved through fear. The new version loves through alignment. The old version chased unavailable people. The new version recognizes their own value without begging to be chosen. The old version confused suffering with devotion. The new version understands that authentic love does not require emotional self-destruction. This shift changes the energetic dynamic completely. Because as you evolve, the connection itself evolves too. And often, right when you stop obsessively trying to force reunion, reunion energy accelerates unexpectedly. Why? Because surrender creates space for alignment. Desperation creates resistance. The universe cannot guide two souls into sacred union while they remain trapped inside old emotional cycles. Those cycles must die first. That is why collapse always comes before rebirth. And perhaps the hardest part of this process is trusting that something beautiful still exists beneath the destruction. Because during the collapse, it feels like life is taking everything away. But spiritually, the universe is not taking. It is clearing. Clearing attachments. Clearing illusions. Clearing karmic residue. Clearing identities that no longer match your destiny. And yes, it hurts deeply. Because humans naturally grieve what they release, even when release is necessary for growth. But one day, you will look back at this season differently. You will realize the collapse was not evidence that your life was falling apart. It was evidence that your soul was finally refusing to settle for less than alignment. Every ending served a purpose. Every loss created space. Every painful detachment guided you closer to your authentic self. And the version of you emerging from this transformation is not weak, abandoned, or broken. They are awakened, stronger, wiser, more aligned than ever before. Because before divine reunion can manifest externally, your soul must first become a place where sacred love can safely live. And sometimes, becoming that person requires the complete destruction of everything you once believed you needed to survive. Chosen one. After all the chaos, after all the heartbreak, after all the spiritual battles that nearly broke your spirit, there comes a moment when everything changes. Not always dramatically. Not always loudly. Sometimes the shift arrives quietly, almost invisibly at first. But your soul feels it immediately. The fear begins fading. The emotional panic weakens. The desperate need to control the outcome disappears. And for the first time in a very long time, peace starts returning to your spirit. This is the moment many chosen ones do not expect. Because after surviving so much emotional intensity, you assume transformation will feel explosive. You think the universe will announce your breakthrough with some dramatic sign or sudden miracle. But often the most powerful spiritual shifts feel surprisingly calm. Why? Because the storm inside you finally ends. And that inner peace changes everything externally. For years, your energy may have been dominated by fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of losing the connection. Fear of not being enough. Fear that divine reunion would never happen. Those fears created emotional turbulence inside your spirit. Even when you tried to stay hopeful, anxiety quietly controlled your energy beneath the surface. But now, something feels different. You stop obsessively searching for signs every moment. You stop replaying old conversations endlessly in your mind. You stop needing constant reassurance from the universe. Not because you stopped caring, but because your soul finally understands something profound. What is truly meant for you does not require fear to sustain it. This realization marks the beginning of energetic alignment. And ironically, this is often when movement begins happening fastest. Because the moment chosen ones stop emotionally chasing, their energy becomes magnetic instead of resistant. This is one of the greatest spiritual paradoxes of the twin flame journey. The more wounded you are, the harder you try to force reunion. But the more healed you become, the less you need to force anything at all. You begin trusting. Trusting yourself. Trusting divine timing. Trusting that what is aligned will arrive naturally. And this trust creates emotional stability powerful enough to shift the entire energetic dynamic. Suddenly, life no longer revolves entirely around waiting. You reconnect with yourself again. You rediscover joy outside the connection. You begin creating peace within your own life instead of emotionally surviving from sign to sign. And while this may sound simple, spiritually it represents enormous transformation. Because the old version of you believed love required suffering. The new version understands love flows best through inner peace. This energetic shift is often the final lesson before reunion. Not chasing, not controlling, not begging, simply aligning. And once alignment begins, strange things start happening. Synchronicities increase again, but this time they feel calmer, softer, less emotionally desperate. You may suddenly hear from people unexpectedly. Paths begin opening naturally. Obstacles that once felt impossible start dissolving. Your intuition becomes stronger than fear. And perhaps most importantly, you stop needing physical confirmation every moment because your inner knowing becomes stable. This inner knowing changes the way you experience the connection entirely. Before, separation may have felt unbearable because you believed distance meant loss. Now, even during silence, something inside you remains calm. You understand that spiritual connections cannot be destroyed by temporary physical distance. That realization removes enormous emotional pressure from the journey. And once pressure disappears, energy flows more freely. This is why many chosen ones report reunion energy intensifying unexpectedly after they finally surrender emotionally. Not surrender through hopelessness, but surrender through inner peace. There is a difference. Hopeless surrender says, I give up because nothing will happen. Peaceful surrender says, I trust what is meant for me will arrive without forcing. That second energy changes your frequency completely. And your twin flame feels it too. Remember earlier in the journey, when fear dominated the connection? One soul chased while the other withdrew. One feared abandonment while the other feared vulnerability. The energy remained unstable because both souls still carried unresolved emotional survival patterns. But now, after all the pain, something deeper begins emerging. Emotional maturity, spiritual awareness, authenticity. Both souls begin understanding the connection differently. Not through obsession, through recognition. And recognition feels calmer than attachment. This is also the stage where many chosen ones begin realizing how much they themselves have changed. Think about who you were at the beginning of this journey. Would the old version of you have survived everything you have endured? Probably not. The old version of you tolerated emotional inconsistency because you feared being alone. The old version begged for clarity from unavailable people. The old version abandoned themselves trying to earn love. But now, you recognize your own value more clearly. You understand your emotional needs deserve respect too. You no longer romanticize suffering the way you once did. And perhaps most importantly, you stop seeing yourself as incomplete without another person. This lesson changes the entire spiritual journey. Because divine union was never about finding someone to complete you. It was about becoming whole enough to experience sacred connection without losing yourself inside it. And once that wholeness begins stabilizing internally, reunion energy naturally accelerates externally. The universe responds differently to healed energy. Why? Because healed energy no longer clings from fear. It attracts through alignment. That is why many chosen ones suddenly experience rapid movement after long periods of silence. Unexpected communication, chance encounters, renewed emotional openness, apologies, confessions, spiritual breakthroughs. Suddenly, situations that once felt blocked begin moving naturally without force. And although every journey unfolds differently, one pattern appears repeatedly. The breakthrough often arrives right after the soul stops emotionally resisting the present moment. Because resistance creates suffering. Acceptance creates flow. This does not mean every chosen one immediately reunites physically overnight. But internally, the war ends first. The fear softens. The desperation dissolves. The soul returns to peace. And once inner peace stabilizes, external reality begins reorganizing itself around that frequency. This is why the moment everything changes often feels deeply personal and invisible before anyone else notices externally. You begin feeling lighter, calmer, more grounded. You stop needing to explain your journey constantly to people who do not understand it. You stop seeking validation for your spiritual experiences. You simply know. And that knowing creates extraordinary emotional freedom. Because no matter what happens externally, your peace no longer disappears so easily. This is true spiritual growth. Not controlling outcomes, but remaining aligned regardless of temporary circumstances. And chosen one, this is the part many souls never reach. Many remain trapped inside emotional chasing for years because they never fully surrender fear. But you survived the collapse. You faced the loneliness. You confronted the wounds. You endured the silence. You survived spiritual battles that should have destroyed your spirit completely. And through all of it, your soul kept evolving. That matters more than you realize. Because every painful experience transformed you into someone capable of holding deeper love without self-destruction. The suffering refined your discernment. The separation strengthened your spirit. The silence deepened your intuition. And now, standing at the edge of this new chapter, something inside you finally understands. You were never being punished. You were being prepared. Prepared to love differently. Prepared to receive differently. Prepared to stop abandoning yourself emotionally. Prepared to recognize alignment instead of chasing illusion. And once this realization fully settles into your spirit, the connection itself changes naturally. Because fear no longer leads the journey. Love does. Not desperate love. Not wounded love. But awakened love. The kind of love rooted in truth instead of emotional survival. And that is the moment everything truly changes. Not when another person suddenly appears. Not when circumstances instantly become perfect. But when your soul finally stops fighting itself. Because once inner alignment happens, external alignment becomes only a matter of time. And perhaps this is the most beautiful truth of the entire journey. The reunion was never only about finding another soul. It was also about finally finding yourself. Chosen one, if you are still here listening to this message, then your spirit already knows something important. You survived battles that were never meant to be easy. There were moments when the pain felt unbearable. Moments when loneliness wrapped around your soul so heavily that you questioned whether anyone would ever truly understand you. Moments when betrayal shattered your trust. Moments when silence from the person you loved most felt like emotional death. Moments when life collapsed so completely that you barely recognized yourself anymore. And yet, you are still here. Still healing. Still awakening. Still searching for truth, even after everything you endured tried to convince you to give up. That matters more than you realize. Because many people allow pain to harden their hearts permanently. Many people abandon their spiritual path the moment transformation becomes uncomfortable. Many people return to toxic cycles because familiarity feels safer than growth. But your soul chose differently. Even through confusion, you kept evolving. Even through heartbreak, you kept loving. Even through spiritual warfare, some part of you refused to stop believing that your life carried deeper meaning. That quiet resilience is not weakness. It is evidence of your awakening. And perhaps now you finally understand why everything had to happen the way it did. The betrayals exposed what could not go with you into your future. The delays prepared your spirit for higher alignment. The separations taught you how to find yourself again. The loneliness forced you to reconnect with your soul. The collapse destroyed identities built around fear. Nothing was random. Even the pain had purpose. Especially the pain. Because before divine reunion could manifest externally, your spirit had to become strong enough to hold sacred love without abandoning itself. That was the true journey all along. Not chasing another person. Not begging for signs. Not suffering endlessly trying to prove your worth. The real journey was awakening to your own value. learning to choose yourself without guilt. Learning that peace matters more than emotional chaos. Learning that authentic love does not require self-destruction to survive. And now, after all the karmic cycles, emotional purging, spiritual battles, and inner transformation, you are no longer the same soul who started this path. Think about how much you have changed. The old version of you tolerated confusion because you feared losing connection. The new version values clarity. The old version overgave, hoping people would finally choose you. The new version understands they were always worthy. The old version chased external validation. The new version listens to their intuition first. The old version confused intensity with destiny. The new version recognizes alignment through peace. This transformation is sacred. And whether reunion happens tomorrow, next month, or later than expected, one truth remains undeniable. You are already becoming the person your soul was meant to become. That realization changes everything. Because once your identity stops depending entirely on external outcomes, fear loses power over your spirit. You stop panicking every time silence appears. You stop collapsing emotionally every time uncertainty surfaces. You stop measuring your worth through someone else's ability to recognize your value. Instead, you begin living differently, more intentionally, more authentically, more peacefully. And chosen one, this is where your energy becomes truly powerful. Not when you desperately chase destiny, but when you finally embody it. There is something beautiful that happens when spiritually awakened souls stop running from themselves. Their light becomes stronger. Their intuition sharpens. Their presence changes. People feel the difference without fully understanding why. Because healed energy carries a different frequency. It no longer begs. It no longer forces. It no longer shrinks itself to fit inside spaces built for smaller versions of who they are. And perhaps that is why your spiritual battle became so intense recently. Because your soul is no longer willing to live beneath its true alignment. You can feel it now. The old cycles no longer satisfy you. The old relationships no longer feel safe. The old emotional patterns no longer fit your spirit. You have outgrown them. And growth always creates separation between who you were and who you are becoming. That separation feels painful at first, but eventually it becomes liberation. Because one day you wake up and realize something extraordinary. You no longer crave the things that once destroyed your peace. You no longer chase people who confuse your spirit. You no longer settle for half-love simply because you fear being alone. That is spiritual maturity. And spiritual maturity changes the entire twin flame journey. Because reunion is not sustained through obsession. It is sustained through emotional wholeness. Two wounded people cannot build sacred union while both remain controlled by fear. But two awakened souls, two people who confronted their shadows, healed their wounds, and learned to love authentically, that kind of connection becomes transformational. Not only for them, but for everyone their energy touches. This is why the universe protected your path even during seasons that felt unbearable. Had certain relationships worked out, they would have blocked your awakening. Had certain doors remained open, you may never have discovered your true strength. Had reunion happened before healing, the connection may have collapsed beneath the weight of unresolved pain. Everything unfolded exactly when your soul was ready to evolve through it. Even the waiting served you. Especially the waiting. Because the waiting taught you patience, discernment, self-respect, emotional independence, inner trust, and perhaps most importantly, the waiting taught you how to hear your own soul clearly. That inner voice is stronger now, isn't it? You feel things differently. You trust your intuition more. You recognize energy faster. You sense when something is aligned, and when it is not. That wisdom was earned through experience, through survival, through spiritual endurance. And although your journey often felt lonely, the truth is this. You were never abandoned. You were guided through transformation step by step. Even during moments when you could not see the purpose clearly. Every setback redirected you. Every heartbreak awakened you. Every ending prepared you. And now, standing at this stage of your evolution, your soul carries something it did not possess before. Clarity. Not perfect certainty about every external outcome, but clarity about yourself, about your worth, about the kind of love your spirit truly deserves. That clarity changes your future permanently, because once awakened souls recognize their value. They stop accepting connections rooted in manipulation, inconsistency, and emotional confusion. They stop betraying themselves for temporary affection. They stop shrinking their light for people committed to darkness. And chosen one, that is exactly why your destiny remains alive. Because despite everything you survived, your heart still carries hope. Not naive hope, awakened hope. The kind built through wisdom instead of fantasy. And that hope matters because your journey is not over yet. There are still blessings approaching you that your current pain cannot fully see. There are still aligned connections waiting to enter your life. There are still moments of peace, joy, healing, and emotional fulfillment your soul has not experienced yet. Do not let temporary darkness convince you otherwise. You did not survive this much transformation just to remain trapped inside old karmic cycles. Forever. You came here to awaken, to heal, to break generational patterns, to rediscover your authentic self, and perhaps to experience a level of love deeper than anything your wounded self once imagined. Possible. So tonight, before this message ends, remember this truth carefully. Your soul did not come this far to miss its destiny. Not after all the lessons. Not after all the healing. Not after all the battles you fought internally when nobody else could see your pain. Something greater is unfolding. Even now. Especially now. So if this message found you at the exact moment your spirit needed confirmation, if you can feel this transformation happening inside your life, if you know deep in your soul that the old version of you is finally dying so something more aligned can be born, then claim your energy. Comment, "I accept my divine reunion." Or type 1111 if you are finally ready to release the old karmic cycle and step fully into the destiny your soul has been preparing for all along. And remember, chosen one, the final spiritual battle only comes to souls standing at the edge of transformation powerful, enough to change their entire life forever.